5 years ago tomorrow, I was stood on this exact spot. In front of me was a Sky TV cameraman, and slightly to my right was a Sky TV presenter. It was bitterly cold. All of us had arrived while it was still dark. But as the sun came up, I realised why we'd chosen this spot. Because over there was a scene of utter devastation. It was the scene of a collapsed boiler house. None of us knew it at the time, but what we were looking at was the worst demolition disaster in living memory.
I'm standing at the entrance to Didcot A. As John was saying there, this is the site that is being decommissioned. Some cooling towers remaining. And here at the entrance, a tight police cordon.
Fire and rescue teams from around the country are helping in this operation. One demolition worker is confirmed dead, and rescuers do not hold out much hope for the 3 who are still missing.
Oxfordshire County Council are telling us that there's been 1 fatality. They're confirming 1 fatality.
None of us could have known that 5 years later we'd still be none the wiser about what caused that accident. Or that 5 years later the families of the 4 men killed on that tragic day would still be waiting to find out why their loved ones had gone to work and never came home. Many years ago I visited Loch Ness. Obviously I didn't see the monster. But as I stood on the banks of that vast expanse of water, I understood how the myth had emerged. Loch Ness is unusually quiet. It's cold. There's something about it that's just off. I know it's only my mind making associations that aren't real, but Didcot feels like that to me now. Like there's something just not quite right. The media was camped on the road that day, and I learned a lot about the way that the media works. I came here to see Sky TV, but as my interview with Sky TV ended, somebody from the BBC approached me and asked me to do an interview with them. When I'd finished with the BBC, I was asked to do one with ITV, and then with Channel 4. Over the course of the day, I did 11 TV interviews, plus a whole host more with news and media outlets, including newspapers and radio stations. There was a police cordon in place that day. 2 police officers were stood here to prevent traffic from getting too close to the scene. Like the rest of us, they were freezing cold. I talked to them for a while, and while we were talking, a lady came over carrying a wicker basket that looked like a prop from an episode of Miss Marple. It contained a thermos flask and several packs of homemade sandwiches. She handed the basket to the police officers and then left. On a day filled with a growing sense of horror, that's a memory that's stuck with me ever since. I was here for both the first and the second anniversary of the Didcot disaster, both times to see the media. I was here for the 3rd and the 4th, but I was here alone. I'm here for the 5th, and I've no idea why I keep coming back, because I absolutely hate it here. I'd been driving home when I first heard news reports of an incident at the Didcot Power Station. Even though I'd been there several times at that point, my mind just didn't make the connection. It was only when I got home and my phone started to ring that I realised that the incident was demolition related. One of the things I remember from that day was how everyone was so careful in their use of language. For most of the day, everyone referred to men that were unaccounted for. It was only towards the end of the day that anyone dared utter the word missing. There was a huge amount of rumour and speculation too. Local people claimed they'd heard an explosion, and there were some initial fears that this was actually a terrorist attack. Local people attempted to reassure themselves with talk of a network of tunnels and basements in which the missing men might be hiding. Looking back, I don't think anyone was convinced. The first people to walk through these gates were the men that built the power station back in the late 1960s. Then came the men and women that kept the plant operational to provide electricity for the local region. Over the course of about 50 years, thousands of men and women walked through these gates. The last people to walk through these gates were the demolition men, responsible for taking the power station down. Over the course of more than 50 years, thousands of people walked through these gates, but 4 of them never walked back out again. The body of Mick Collins was recovered almost immediately, before the Health and Safety Executive threw a cordon around the entire site. The remains of the 3 other men would lay undiscovered for more than 6 months. They would not be recovered until after the remains of the collapsed boiler house had been felled in a controlled explosion on the morning of the 17th of July 2016. On the 31st of August 2016, 190 days after the boiler house collapsed, it was confirmed that a body had been found in the rubble. On the 3rd of September, that body was identified as Christopher Huxtable. On the 8th of September 2016, police confirmed they'd found the body of another of the remaining 2 missing men. On the 9th of September, the body was formally identified as that of Ken Cresswell. The last missing worker was found on the same day. He was identified as John Shaw. 199 days had elapsed since the day of the accident. I did about 20 media interviews the day after the accident. I've probably done about another 50 since. That's hundreds and hundreds of questions, and I fielded all of them. But I haven't answered any. There were no answers on the day after the accident. And as I stand here on the same spot that I was stood 1,826 days ago, I still don't have any answers. Sadly, painfully and tragically, neither does anybody else.